Okay, obviously today's topic is a very sensitive topic. It's, some groups would consider this to be as close to, I don't know how to define it. I don't want to give it different names. But and the discussion is the validity of Yom Haatzmaut, which means not necessarily if you should say Hallel, you should not say Tachnun, you should say with a bracha. That's a different discussion, which is also written much in the poskim. If you want to take a look, Cham Ovadia speaks about this in the Bia Omer and many others, but that's not a discussion today. I just want to know that is it valid to have a holiday such as Yom Haatzmaut? And if you take a look, like this week, we come across, this week and last week, we come across a day called Yom HaShoah, which is something that Chazal didn't establish. It's something new, that they decided this day should be to memorize the Holocaust. And then afterwards, this week is today is Yom HaZikaron, which is again out of nowhere. They decided it should be this day out of all days of the year. Day afterwards is Yom Haatzmaut, and then later on in the month would be Yom Yerushalayim. Mechatesi, you can just create days. That's a question. So before we deal with how, if you're allowed to create days, does it have any meaning? Are you allowed, first of all, let's deal, is it Baal Tosif? Because why should I think it's Baal Tosif? Because the Gemara in Megillah says that Chachamim came to Esther. Esther says, Kiv'uni ledorot. Write me, write Megillah Esther and make a new holiday called Purim. I said, it's impossible. זאת התורה זאת התורה שאין נביא רשאי לחדש דבר מעתה, which means you're not allowed to add just holidays, you're not allowed to add mitzvahs, you're not allowed to add Megilah Esther to the Ketuvim. You can't do that. So they sat down and they were very disturbed, and they looked and they learned the sugya until they came out with a pasuk. First, they thought it's also because it says Shlishim velo Revim, which means there's a certain amount of holidays, a certain amount of ksubim you can have, but you're not allowed to add to that. And then they came out with a pasuk that they relied on that to have an extra holiday of Purim. So, according to that understanding, you're allowed to have Purim because they found a pasuk for it, but you can't just make up holidays along the year because of things that happened recently. That's the way it comes out. And really, the Ramban asked this question. It's a Feirush Ramban in the Chumash, and he brings down this idea of not adding holidays because it could be an Isur of Baal Tosif. You're adding on something to the Torah which is not permitted, and again, the raya that he brings, it's from this, that the Skenim was sitting down and trying to search a way to permit doing what Esther requested from them to do.
But who was the one who made the Purim? You're talking about the Devarim.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Okay. I have 20 minutes. Now, the Rambam seems to argue on this, because the Rambam in Hilchos Mamrim asked the question. He says that how did Chachamim were able to add mitzvahs derabanan? It's Baal Tosif. For instance, you have an issue of eating basar b'chalov. That's issue deraisa. But how are you allowed to add to that oif with chalov? That's an issue. That's you adding a mitzvah. The Torah didn't say that. And there's many things that are derabanan. I'm not talking about takanos or anything zeiris or siyagim, but mitzvahs. This mitzvahs that Chachamim said that you can argue that it's Baal Tosif, Adlakas Neiros, Chanukah, Shabbos. These are all mitzvahs derabanan that they added that a person should perform. That's called Baal Tosif. How are you allowed to have such a thing? It's a question in the Rambam, in Hilchos Mamrim, and the Rambam answers that it is permitted as long as you're saying that this is the Rabban Chachamim. When they established this, they said it's not a deraisa, it's the Rabban. And once you know it's not deraisa, then it's not an issue of Bal Tosif. Bal Tosif means that you're adding to the mitzvahs of the Torah, and it's clear and understood, the mitzvah of Bal Tosif, because the Torah is complete. And if you come to add to the Torah, you are really saying that the Torah is not perfect, and I can come up with things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't come up. I'm a little smarter, I'm new and improved, and if Hashem said that this is how you should do things, I want to do them better because I think it could be improved. So that's basically, I don't know if you want to say it's a gather of chutzpah, or kfira, whatever it is, but it's definitely the issue of Bal Tosif. The Torah says you don't need to add to the Torah, it is complete. So if you're adding a mitzvah and you're calling it, the Rabbanan says the Rambam, that's fine. So according to the Rambam, you have no problem over here. You might say that adding a holiday that has no relation to religion, it's not bichlal the topic, because you're saying I'm adding a day during the year which is completely not religion, just like Yom Haatzmaut or Yom HaZikaron, all these things. Memorial Day, Luther King Day, whatever you want to add throughout on the calendar, it's not a religious day. But the Rambam writes in Hilchos Melachim that a goy is not allowed to add a mitzvah. He's not allowed to add a mitzvah or add a holiday or a Shabbos. He's not allowed to be shoyves. He's not allowed to say, on Sunday I don't work, on Friday I don't work. The Rambam says that's not permitted. You're not allowed to add a day of rest or a day of a holiday. You call it a holiday. You're not allowed. So you see it has halachic implications. Even when a goy does something like that, kol sheken that we're not allowed to do that and add a day to the calendar, says the Rambam.
So when they give you a day off from work for Memorial Day, I should say, no, I have to go to work.
No. You definitely could take a day off. The question is, are you allowed to establish a day that's considered a holiday? That's our discussion. The Rambam seems to say that you're not allowed to have, a goy is not allowed to establish a holiday. It's a Beferish Rambam. You're not us, a goy. He's not allowed to add a Yom Shabbos. What does it mean, the Yom Shabbos? It doesn't work. Doesn't mean that he's going to keep Lametes Melachos. He doesn't work on that day. He says that that's my day. That's a fixed day that no one's allowed to work. That's not permitted, says the Rambam. So same thing would be if you want to add. You see that although it's not a halachic day, it's not a religious day. Just if you designate a date on a calendar and say that day I'm not going to work, that becomes a little problematic. It becomes problematic, for instance, in Valentine's Day and Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving already, Moshe speaks about in length. It has halachic problems. It's few tshuvos from Moshe. Anyway, whatever it is, we said that according to the Rambam, if you add some day on the calendar and you say that it's not the Torah was mechayev this, at least you're not over on Bal Tosif. Now we come into a question: can you have a day that a miracle happened that day, something wonderful happened that day, and you want to memorize this and continue and put it on the calendar for generations to come, even for your children? Are you allowed to have such a day? So then we found, first it's a Mishnah Berurah, Befeirush Mishnah Berurah in Hilchos Purim, two places. Mishnah Berurah in the beginning of Hilchos Purim brings down that a community that had a miracle is allowed to be kovea, to establish that day as a day of Purim. That's the way the Mishnah Berurah names it. It's like a day of Purim, which means it's a day of celebration. It's a day, says the Mishnah Berurah, it's a day that the Suda that you make on it would be considered the Suda's mitzvah, not like, for instance, the way it's brought down in Hilchos Chanukah, that if you make a Suda, so you should say Divrei Torah, because if you say Divrei Torah, it makes it into a Suda's mitzvah. But over here, says the Mishnah Berurah, that regardless, since you're doing it on that day that you named for generations to come means your children and your grandchildren would keep that day. That is already considered the Suda's mitzvah, just doing a Suda on that day. So that is for the community. That's for the community that had a community or a country that had some miracle happen to them. They're allowed to be kovea such a day. We see that idea. Then the Mishnah Berurah in the end of Hilchos Purim brings down for an individual, which means a person that had a miracle himself, not as a community of himself. So he could be kovea for himself such a day. Again, he would be mechayev, not only him, he would be mechayev also generations to come. The Shevet HaLevi of Shmuel Vosner Zatzal was asked about the Yom Tov that one of G'dolei Yisrael, Yom Tov Herel, the Taisus Yom Tov, he was saved, and he named a day to be such a day considered to be like Purim, which means that it's a day that he would be remembering forever as a day that a miracle happened to him and thanking Hashem. And not only it's mechayev him, it's mechayev also his descendants. The Mishnah Berurah says becherem uveshvua. It's mamash like it has a very strong tie with a cherem, it's like a neder for generations to come. And Shevet HaLevi was asked, should his children, descendants, generations to come keep that? Shevet HaLevi, it's many years ago, and Shevet HaLevi now sits down and he says, of course, those that know that they are miyuchas to the Taisus Yom Tov must keep those days that were established. I think Chabad have such a day when the Admor HaZaken was released from jail, right? When is it? Huh? Yeah. Okay, I'm just checking to make sure that everybody knows dates over here. Okay, I'm making sure people listening also, paying attention.
There's many examples of this throughout of cities having.
Indeed, yes. So this idea is brought down already in the Rishonim. The Ramban and the Meiri bring down this idea that a person is allowed to have such a day to remember a happy occasion that happened to him. And on the other coin also, if it's a sad day of something that sad that happened, one is allowed to fix a day that day he'll remember, he'll say whatever, like they say today for Yom HaShoah Kaddish and so on and so forth. I mean, it is rooted already in the Rishonim, in the Ramban, and in the Meiri. So the question would come that our friend over here asked, that's good if you have a rabbi establishing such a day, or Chazal established such a day, such as Mordechai, or in the time of Hanukkah. But Mechatesi, you can have a group of people that are secular in Israel that's sitting on the government, in the Knesset, and they'll establish a day called Yom Haatzmaut on a certain day, and then Yom HaZikaron and Yom Yerushalayim. Who gave them?
They're not secular. I mean, some of them are secular.
Okay, not secular. Let's not. I didn't mean to say that in a derogatory way. I meant to say that usually to establish a day like that we should celebrate it. And
it's not been possible. It's not been by like Dr. Torah is like, okay, we have a Rambam that said, okay, we're gonna. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I'm trying to see if we should consider that day with chashivus more than just going making barbecue and going to hear lipa singing. Does it have more chashivus than that? Should I keep it, or should I say, you know what, Yom Haatzmaut is for chiloinim, and I'm going my way. I'm going to come to work in an office like it's a regular day. So if you're saying that some people in the Knesset, religious or not, but it wasn't established by rabbis, the Chidah writes that any minhag that wasn't established by rabbis is not a minhag, even though maybe people started doing such minhag, but it needs to be established by a rabbi. The Rashba writes that if even things that grandmothers did, that's how he says, even saftot, even grandmothers did, a person should take seriously, even though you don't see a source to it, because it must be that such a thing had foundations. It wasn't out of the blue. The grandmother didn't wake up one day and decided that she's going to do something that today we're continuing. She saw it from Masoret, Aywa. In short word, yes. So, if we go along with the question that I presented, it needs to be established by at least rabbis, some people that you can relate to that are religious people, or at least religious authorities in order to give it some staple that we should follow. And over here, we can maybe refer to a Rosh. The Rosh writes, I write about this in my Sefer, the Rosh brings down that whenever there's a community and they want to do something in the community, you have an argument in a community. Some want to do this way and others want to do it a different way, or they don't want to do whatever the community decides, or whatever the heads of the communities decide. How do you know what to do? Says the Rosh, you follow majority, which means the community itself, even if they're not rabbis, even if they're not very religious, the community itself, as a power of community, you follow majority. So therefore, if they say the community decides that they'll fix the roads, and some people say we don't want to fix the roads, so you go and follow majority, and then even those individuals that didn't want to join in must join in and do whatever the community decided. The majority of the community decided. We found such a thing. There's a Gemara in Baba Basra also, that the Gemara says that the community and the leaders of the community have the authority to force others to follow their lead on whatever they decided, which means even though it's nothing to do with Torah, mitzvot, halachos, nothing like that, but they want to do something in the city, they want to put a stop sign on a certain road, and either the leaders of the community decide that this is the way it should be, or the community is at large, they come to a vote, and this is what they decide, so you have to follow that as well. According to that, it seems like that since the majority of people in Eretz Yisrael celebrate those days, it's mechayev everybody. That's the way it comes out. And if you might think that, you know what, that's true, maybe in Eretz Yisrael, that could be the majority, but not necessarily around the world. Maybe around the world, maybe you don't have that much people that would follow. So there is a Yerushalmi that brings down that everything is decided in Eretz Yisrael, which means a community has a Shem community only in Eretz Yisrael, and we don't consider communities outside of Eretz Yisrael. If you take that Yerushalmi La'alacha, comes out that those days that were established, forget about who established them. It could be that a person that is not religious, but if it was established and accepted by the majority of the people and they follow that, so it seems like it's mechayev everybody to do that as well. So whatever I'm telling you right now, this is the opinion of the Maharam al-Shakar, which majority of the poskim agree with, but the Bri Chadash argues. The Bri Chadash holds that you don't have such a obligation to follow whatever they decide as a day to commemorate, and it doesn't have any base. So if you follow that Bri Chadash, everything we said right now is not valid. It falls apart. But Lemaisa, as I said, most poskim go with the Maharam al-Shakar, and if you want to know Chacham Ovadia, he himself brings down like this also, the Chida also brings like that one should celebrate based on the Maharam al-Shakar. Chacham Ovadia himself writes that if we take to the next step, should a person say Hallel or not, Chacham Ovadia writes in his Sefer Rabbi Omer that Hallel should be said without a bracha. So that's a little bit surprising. There's many others that hold it like that as well. Of course, I don't want to go into the machlokas, Tzionim, not Tzionim. We're talking about Yom Haatzmaut.
No, I'm saying the full Hallel or just the half? Like Rosh Chodesh or like
I don't remember what he says with that. He says without a bracha, because bracha, since you have a machloket, so you say Safek Brachot Lakel, and you can't just say brachot. But Yayaski Lavdi,
every day, just do the whole thing at Hallel too. It's fine. You might as well. It doesn't hurt. It's only good. It's only a good thing.
Yaski Lavdi, Rav Ovadia Adaya, wrote that even if you want to say that it should be said, Hallel should be said, and so on, but the date that was decided, why was it decided on that day in the calendar out of all other days? It doesn't make any sense. On the contrary, we see from Hanukkah that a day of celebration should be done when the war ends, not when the war begins. And Yom Haatzmaut is when the war actually began. The independent war started on that very day. It was just a declaration day. So if anything, that shouldn't be the day that you celebrate. That's what Rav Ovadia Adaya said. But according to what we explained before, is that the power of the community has the authority to decide when it would be, or at least if they follow, it becomes like something that's muskam. So it could be that answers the question. This is a very quick overview, but we want to hear now the questions on everything that I said. I'm sure if we would have over here the Torah Karta, the Satmar, and other Hasidim, besides that, I'll be in danger, but I'm sure they'll have a lot of answers to my questions.
Just curiosity, is it just the item of the city, of the country? Is it all Yidden?
So we said that there's a Gemara in Yerushalayim that holds that the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. So yeah.
So wouldn't that mean that the ones who are not in Eretz Yisrael, because
they're not
home base, and therefore they shouldn't celebrate?
Those that are not in Eretz Yisrael seems to have to follow whatever in Eretz Yisrael they decided. We have no say in the matter. That's how it comes out. Look, what I'm saying right now is b'derech pilpul be'alma. Of course, go ask your rabbi what you should do. I'm just telling you some ideas that should spice up the bagel with cream cheese that you were eating. Thank you very much.